Hello, everybody. Looks like we've got, most everybody got in from the waiting room okay. Thank you, everybody, for pivoting with us here. I know we were originally planning to host this as a webinar, but we did have to make a quick shift. We've got so much going on with the Responsive Summit this week. So thank you guys for joining us for a slightly more informal edition of the Virtuous Insider. Really thrilled to be able to do this again. And today is a little bit more loose in any event because today is really, there's not an agenda that I have set, which is not always the case. This is going to be our Q&A extravaganza episode. So this is where we're going to answer your questions. We did have some folks that did submit questions in advance. They sent those in using that training email address, which is fantastic. We'll address some of those. And if anyone else has a question, please do feel free to go ahead and submit that. You can submit that using the chat, and then we'll go ahead and try to get as many of those answered as we can. That's it. That's all we want to do today. And so joining me today is our co-host, Stephanie Larson. Stephanie is on the training team here at Virtuous as well. Hi, Stephanie.
Hey there, Scott.
And Stephanie's going to be manning that chat. So as you send things in, she'll be able to see those questions and grab those and then basically put me in the dunk tank for the next 30 minutes and ask me a few questions. And legitimately, that's our agenda. Normally, we've got some new features we want to run through and everything else, but to keep things short, because we've got so much going on, our agenda is your questions and nothing else. Okay, so this whole thing is question time. So, Stephanie, I know, like we mentioned, you've got some questions that folks have sent in advance. What do you got?
So we're going to go ahead and start with tags. Can tags be applied both manually and according to business rules that are established based on a person's activity?
1,000%. Yes. I can go in now. This is all assuming permissions, right? This is a little bit of a tricky question, and this is true for a lot of these questions. So please keep this in mind, everybody. Sometimes someone will say, "Hey, can I manually add a tag to a contact?" Well, sure, the system will let a user add a tag to a contact. However, you as a user need to have the right permissions. Now, I'm going to gather that at least a good handful of the folks on today are probably admins, right? Or probably have some advanced permissions within your Virtuous environment. But in the event that you don't, for whatever reason, then you might not be able to add a tag. So you'd have to speak to your internal admin to make sure you can get the correct permissions. But I can manually add a tag to a contact. There's my little add button, and then I can select a tag. I can add multiple tags if I wanted to. That's totally fine, and add them all at once. And then as far as applying these in automation, well, yeah, I can build an automated workflow, and then I can create whatever business rules I want to use to be able to apply tags to my contacts. And so even in, for example, the donor lifecycle, this is one of the best practice workflows that's available right out of the box. I can use this best practice workflow. You can see here, sustaining and major donor. These are really just adding tags based on my criteria. Major donor is always a pretty good example because everybody has their criteria for what constitutes a major donor, right? So you can define that, usually some combination of someone's highest, gift amount, life to date, their largest gift, and whatever they've given as a grand total life to date, right? Some combination of those two. You can use that to then add tags to define major donors automatically. Okay, what else? I know we've got a lot to get through, and I'm seeing some come in the chat too. I'll try to be as brief as I can.
Yeah, Scott, no jammering away at this, okay? Quick answers. No, I'm just kidding. And I have, nature. Just so everyone knows, I've been pulling the questions from the chat and kind of popping them into the queue over here. So, Scott, how can donor search data be used in queries, reports, and workflows?
Excellent question. So if you do have donor search integration enabled, and let's go back to our contact we were looking at. Let's see the McSample folks. They're very nice people. There we go. So if you've got the donor search integration enabled, you'll be able to see some of the basic wealth data that shows up right here when you go ahead and search for some of that wealth data. And then you can also click to view all wealth data. That'll give you a whole lot of information, right, on that donor, on their wealth, their total charitable giving, giving within the nonprofit sector, right, to different types of organizations and political giving. And all of these fields, everything that you see here is available in the query tool when you run a contact query. So that means that any and all of these values can be used whenever you're segmenting your donors, right? They can be used in other queries. They can be used in queries that you will then pull into some of your own custom reports. And because automation is powered by queries, you can use any of those values to be able to go ahead and trigger certain automation steps. So donor rating, that's based on that donor score that's coming out of donor search, right? I can look at their sector giving. So to grant making orgs, giving and gift count, right? Education giving and higher education giving. All of those fields are available here in my contact query for me to use however I would like.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott.
Sure.
So question on a donation. So when entering a donation, what's the difference between the notes field and the description box for non-cash gifts?
Oh, excellent. So if I am creating a gift, so let's say that I'm in the gift and contact import tool. I've probably got some here that are in progress, like I always do. You can tell I'm not a real nonprofit here because none of these gifts are in my database. But let's say we're going to enter this for good old Bob example. There he is, Esquire. He's a little fancy now. And if I switch the gift type to non-cash, that's when I'll see that non-cash description show up. The notes field is always available. The notes field would really be a space where you would have notes potentially from the donor, right? Especially in an online donation form, you may give them the opportunity to send something in that says, hey, we really love you guys and we love the work you've been doing. You're one of our favorite organizations. Keep up the great work. Great. I can plug that into the notes. I know we have some integrations with other systems that will send over some metadata about the gift in the notes field as well to tell you more context about the gift. The description field is only a field that appears when you enter a non-cash gift. And the idea with the description field is that it allows you to put in some more detail about the specific item that was donated, especially if you're going to use other for the non-cash gift type. So if someone donated 25 men's dress shirts and 6 men's suits, and I've got probably have a shelter that I'm running, then I can put that description in there to say, hey, these are the items that were given.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott. Okay. When creating communications from Virtuous Marketing, why is there a choice of new email or new template when you're using a Virtuous template?
So creating communications. It doesn't sound like we're creating communications here. It sounds like we're creating emails. I'm going to say, because communications would tell me that I'm creating a campaign communication. But if I'm going into Virtuous email and I'm looking at some of the Virtuous templates that are available, right? There's my organization templates or the Virtuous templates. There, I have the option when I click here to say, create a new email or create a new template. So the idea would be that here, I might say, hey, look, I really like this template or this layout, or maybe I like this one because I like the big block of color at the top. But for my organization, well, that doesn't match our styling, right? Our colors are different. Our logo is different. So I could either use this as the basis for creating a brand new email, or I could say, hey, I want to use this as the basis for building a new organizational template that might look a lot like this, but I'm going to insert our colors. I'm going to change this blue to be something else. I'm going to insert my logo. And I've actually done that here. So I've taken this alternate template And I use that to create what I called this little sample template here. You can see it's the same basic design, but I swapped out some of the colors and some other things and then, sort of made it my own in this case. So that's why you see those two options.
I love it. It's the copy paste and then slightly shift the paste. Okay, so we're talking contacts for a second. When we're editing the primary and secondary contacts of an organization, is there a way to edit the primary contact to display a contact that already exists in Virtuous?
Okay, so I'm going to be a stickler here, and some of you guys who have been around and have been on other sessions with me will know that. I'm a big stickler for terminology because I think that the more that we can start to speak the same language, so to speak, when we talk about Virtuous, the easier things are going to be. So if I'm editing the record for an organization, so a contact record that's an organization, these guys are a foundation. I was trying to see if I had any organizations just sitting on my dashboard, but it sure doesn't look like it. Well, we're going to use these guys as the example anyway. But if I'm editing the record, I'm not setting a primary contact, right? I'm going to set the primary individual. I can have as many individuals as I want here, but Carol is my primary individual. Now, if I wanted to make Anne or I wanted to make Albert the primary individual, I could. But it sounds like the question here is, hey, could I take someone else who's on a related record, like Harry, who works here, and make him the primary individual on this record? And the answer is no. Harry lives in his house. Right? Carol's data, all of her information as an individual lives, quote unquote, on this particular contact record. Okay. So Harry lives in his house. I can relate him to the record. That's where the relationships really come into play. Right. But if I've got a direct relationship with Harry, he's a donor. I've built a relationship with him and his wife that's separate from his role at the organization. I want to have them in their own household contact record, and I want to have them separate from this particular record. So I'm going to have a separate individual, even if that individual is, for lack of a better term, sort of a placeholder individual that I have on the record.
I love it. Okay. So someone has 3 unique causes that their donors give to. Is there a way to send a new donor an email that's tailored to the specific cause they gave to within an automation step?
Yes. Well, and especially in this case, because you just mentioned that there are 3 different sort of project buckets that someone might want to give to. So the key would be that I'd have to have a separate step and a separate query to identify each of those donors. Now, one thing to keep in mind here, well, 2 things. Again, I'm trying to be brief. There's so many questions, man. If we have to go over the 30-minute mark, I don't know. We'll try to keep it in time, though, because there's so many other great presentations going on today. But 2 things. Number 1, I can do that by creating a query for gifts to a particular project. Okay. So in the query tool, I'm going to identify these donors or the projects they've given to by first creating a gift query. Okay. And that gift query is going to give me all the gifts to whatever project it is that I'm looking for. So let's say that I'm going to set a nice gift date range for myself. So the gift date was within, let's say, the last 30 days. Okay, so the gift date's been within the last 30 days, and then we can set my project. Now, whenever you're querying by project, always use the project code. Always, always. Your project code is the unique identifier. It's going to be a much better and cleaner way to query based on projects. Project names don't have to be unique. Not that you're going to set duplicate project names, but it's possible, right? And we don't want to take that chance. But then I can come in here and say, my ED 1234, my education project. Great. That will give me all of the gifts in the last 30 days to the education project. Okay. And then I can nest that into a contact query to get all the donors who've given a gift to my education project. And I would repeat this for the other 2 projects. One thing to keep in mind, though, is that someone could give a gift that is split among multiple projects. They're not always going to give just to one project. So with 3 of these, I'd probably want to add a 4th that allows me to identify folks who have given to more than one project. Okay. Easiest way to do that in this case would simply be to say that I want to find out everybody who has a gift in the last 30 days where the project count, right, is greater than 1. So that means you gave to 2 or more projects. So that automatically tells me you've split your gift, because now my content can't be specific to just one project. It has to be slightly more generic because you gave to a whole range of projects potentially. You gave to 2, 3, however many there are. Okay. And I would build that into my workflow. Now, when you construct your workflow, you want to remember that we run enrollment on those workflow steps from right to left. Okay, using our donor life cycle as an example again, just because it's here and it's handy. When we run enrollment for this, we're going to start over here on the right and run any query or filter associated there, and then we're going to work our way back to the left. And so that means that in this particular case, your query for folks who have given to more than one project will need to be the furthest to the right to make sure that it catches them first. And then everybody who's given to only one project would get sorted into one of the remaining 3 categories so they can get a thank you that's specific to the project they're supporting. Hopefully that made sense. Again, trying to move through as quickly as we can to get through as many of these as time allows.
Speed round of everything, Scott. Yeah. Well done. Okay, let's talk campaigns. Can you unarchive an archived campaign?
No. Once you've archived a campaign, I cannot unarchive that campaign. However, I can still see the segment codes and everything associated with the gifts for that particular campaign. I don't lose that data. The only thing that I kind of lose out on, I lose out on basically 2 things. 1, I can't add gifts to that campaign anymore because now it's done. And number 2, if I'm going to use some of the dashboard campaign reports like campaign giving and campaign summary, I can't select an archived campaign when I run those reports.
Makes sense. All right, let's talk kind of similar about undoing some things. So is there a mass undo capability in the works? So someone had a case where someone on their team did a bulk contact note upload, when not everyone on that file really should have gotten it.
No, there isn't going to be a way to be able to bulk sort of take back and import. The key to remember is if I'm using some of the bulk data tools, and we don't talk a lot about these in some of these training webinars and things, right? There's a few of these for updating data. There's our update templates to be able to do that. You can mass import data from here, right? Especially I can mass import contact notes from here. But whenever I do that, it's actually a 2-stage import process. So I'll upload my file, it'll review it, and then it'll come back to me and say, okay, here's how many records we found in your file. Here's how many are going to be updated. Here's how many headers might be missing from your file, or here's the rows that we can't do. Do you want to review the file before we do it? We try to put all of those checks and balances up front, right? To make sure that, yes, I am importing and doing what I want to do or meant to do. And then once I do that, okay, once I import, I can't take that import back again, right? So we want to make sure those checks and balances are up front and not behind the scenes, or not something that you do after you've made the import. Oh my gosh, Chris just pointed out there is an unarchived campaign button. I forgot that we did that. See?
I was going to make it like a dunk tank splash sound.
What's that?
I was going to try so hard to make like a dunk tank splash sound.
I know, we should do that. Whenever someone stumps me, that would be great. You're right. You can unarchive campaigns now because we've had that question before. Oh man, Chris is going to enjoy having this over me for a while now.
Chris, you win today's session.
Yes, Chris, you win a virtual prize, at least for now.
Okay, I have a question kind of related to the unarchiving of campaigns that we were just talking about. if you can't take back an import, is there a way to revert to a previously saved one? Or, excuse me, a previously saved, like, time shot of Virtuous, basically?
Yes, but that's really the nuclear option, right? So that would be, hey, someone broke into our office, or they hacked into Virtuous and they deleted all of the data in Virtuous, right? Or and a disgruntled employee got access and they replaced everybody's first name with you and their last name with stink. And what are we going to do? In those cases, yes, we can do a point in time restore on Virtuous. But if the issue is I imported, a few more records than I meant to, I don't know that we want to go with that option, because then we have to get everybody out of the database, right? And it takes our developers time to go in and do that restore. And if there's any actual work that happened in the interim, hey, I had my team importing gifts during the hour when this happened, well, we're going to lose all of those changes when we restore to, a point a few hours ago. So for an import, I would say that, again, the key is I want to make sure that I'm going through all of those checks and all the stages before I do that import. There's a reason why, every user doesn't get access to the bulk data tools, right? We don't want people to be able to do that sort of bulk update. But I want to make sure I'm double checking all of that before it goes in. If something does happen afterward and you needed to reach out to us and figure out, hey, what are my options? We can work with you on that. But I'd say the point in time restore is really something that would be a rare occurrence.
I just want to clarify, Scott. So I shouldn't be training everyone that everybody's name should be Stephanie Rules? No?
Yeah, that's just the default name, right? When someone is an anonymous donor.
Just making sure. Okay, so we want to talk financial score. So is there a way, or will in a future release, the financial score on a contact record take into account pass-through giving?
It's something that we've talked about. The danger with that is pass-through giving and soft credits in general are sort of an invention of the nonprofit sector. There aren't a lot of hard and fast rules governing pass-through giving and how they're used. And I know I've talked to folks who use pass-through giving as a way to track other things like board solicitations and other sorts of things like that. And so that means that, I'm in danger. If I start to include pass-through giving in that score, I'm in danger of potentially inflating that score with giving that's not actually something that's relevant for my particular donor, right? So it's something we've talked about. It's something we've considered. We've kind of gone back and forth on it. I'm not saying we're never going to happen, but I know it's not something that's happening. This is not something that's going to happen in the next release.
Makes sense. Consistency across the board really makes a difference on things.
Yep.
Okay, so under the Virtuous relationship building recommendations, and the best calls to make today, Zoom, you're there. There is a trash can icon for each call recommendation. What's the intended purpose of that trash can?
That's to remove someone from the best calls list. So let's talk about this real quickly, right? Both of these icons over here, they both mean different things. So the best calls list, number one, everybody wants to remember this is a shared list across your organization of the people that you should be talking to. They're your best donors. They're your best prospects because they've got high financial scores. So they're really good donors, or they've got a lot of social capital. We've identified that based on the social score, or there's someone who has high scores that is lapsed or is in danger of lapsing. We're about to lose Clark Kent. That's going to be terrible. Okay. So that's the idea with this list. If I were to call Tony Stark and have a chat with him and just check in, see how he's doing, then I would click on the clipboard over here. And that would allow me to say, hey, I called Tony, lets me log a note to say how that call went, and it will remove him from the best calls list. That way, someone else isn't going to see him on the list and decide to pick up the phone and call him. Now, after a few months, we haven't really spoken to him. He'll probably bubble back up again, and I'll give him a call again. Now, the trash can icon removes him from the list. Now, again, I want to be very careful here. Let's say that Tony's not my donor, and I think, well, I'm not calling him, so I click on the trash can to dismiss it. Well, once I do that, it says undo, gives me a chance. We were just talking about undo, right? This gives me a chance to take this back until I leave this page. But if I do remove him from this list, that's going to remove him from this list for everybody across the organization. So if someone else was supposed to call him, they're not going to. Now, in the case where I see, for example, a foundation show up here, like this one down here, this particular foundation, right, they might be just giving us grant support. Okay. So for them, I might say, yeah, I'm going to delete that because no one's calling them and checking in with them. We just write grants with them. That would be fine. But I would be very judicious about when I really blow them away from this list, unless I'm sure that no one's going to call them.
So Scott, related to that, while you're here, Tony Stark specifically, he has a recent activity from 3 days ago. So what would be the reason that he's on the best to call list today? Do we know what type of note it was?
So 2 reasons. Number one, because for me, this is a sandbox account. So it's got a little bit of a different rule set, and everybody gets a note in there every other day, pretty much, because they get seeded automatically. Plus, I've actually kept him at the top of my relationship building list forever. I haven't called him. I haven't done anything with him. So I haven't dismissed that call. After a while, if I dismiss him, then he will bubble back up. I kind of keep him there because I tend to use him a lot as an example. And that way I know he's right there.
And also, I mean, we really should be calling Tony Stark very often. So it makes sense. Okay. So when we had a migration to Virtuous, we had brought over some communication types, contact note types, and relationship types that we're just no longer using. So we can disable any unused types, but in a future release, is it something where we might be able to delete unused types?
We shy away from deleting. Most of you probably realize this. We shy away from deleting across the board because you can create other data issues in the database. So that's why we tend to archive, right? Or in some cases, soft delete. Now, the thing is, anything that is disabled, if it's no longer active, it's no longer enabled, then the vast majority of your users have no idea that that exists, right? Because they're not going to see those note types or relationship types or anything when they go to log a note or when they go to create a new relationship. The only place you're going to see those hanging out is when you're in the settings on the back end looking at all the customization options.
Thank you, Scott. Okay, so this is a bit of a long one. And I know we're at time, so I hope we're going to run this one through. How can we ensure that spouses of recurring donors do not receive the new donor welcome series, even when they give independently of the normal contact record? So for example, we have the husband who's a monthly donor. The wife is listed as an individual under that household contact record, but the husband's name is what appears on gifts. When the wife donates independently, she had a new contact record apart from her husband's created, and then that qualified her for the new donor welcome series. So is there a way to avoid that?
Well, yeah, the key would be don't create a new contact record for the wife, right? Remember, contact records are households, right? So Harry and Sally McSample are a household. This 937,355 in life to date giving, that's not Harry's giving or Sally's giving. That is their giving for the household. So even if Harry's the one who's been doing most of the giving because he's got a recurring gift, and then Sally goes onto my website and she decides to make a donation on her own, right? Using her credit card because she likes what we do and she figures, why not? Great. Well, that gift should be added to this contact record because it's still giving from this household. Now, when you import a gift, right, gifts can still be attributed to, or you can tag essentially an individual on that gift. And when I go into the giving history for this account, then I can see on some of these gifts, well, who was it that kind of made that gift happen, right? I can't remember which gifts have been imported and which ones have been examples of which sorts of things, but you can see here the individual identified on this gift was Harry. So he's the one who made it happen. Great. I'll have some others where maybe Sally is the one tagged on the gift, but it's all part of the same account. So even if Sally decides to give on her own, that doesn't mean that I need to create a new contact record for her, unless for whatever reason that couple's already said, hey, we like to do our giving separately. We file our taxes as married filing separately, and we each want our own year-end statement. So please keep it all separated. Right? In that case, it's going to be a little bit tough. Right? The only way to do that would be to exclude anyone who is related to a contact who is a monthly donor. And that would require nesting a few different queries. Not even sure if I can get my head around quite how. But yeah, the key would be to make sure that I've got that household set up correctly, so I don't see separate giving history, or I don't have separate records for either of them.
Makes sense. That's a tough one. Okay, so talking about notes for a second, can you add notes on behalf of someone else? So we have a development officer when they're traveling, and this person is adding notes on their behalf. But then when they run the activity report, the notes really need to be tied to the development officer, not the person entering. Is there a way to do that?
Not from here, right? So yeah, anybody who, if you log a note in here, you'll notice you can put in a lot of information, but not, hey, here's the person who actually did the note. Right? Because the person who logs the note is the person who created it. Now, there's two things you can do. One, if someone is not going to be at their desk a lot, they're on the go a lot, if they wanted to use the Virtuous mobile app, one of the things you can do from the app is you can actually look up a contact and add a contact note right from there. So I don't have to be sitting down at my laptop to log a note or say that I did something. Now, the only other way to do this would be to go back. This is kind of nice thematically. Go back to something we were talking about earlier, which is the contact note import from the bulk data tools. When I import a note from there, I can set the note author. Now, I have to use the email address of the user, okay, who is actually logging the note. But I can do that to say, hey, I've got some notes here that I'm putting in, but they're not mine. They're somebody else's.
Love it. Awesome. Thank you, Scott. So those are all the questions that we had. We did have a couple that I've messaged independently where we'll take a closer look at that specific scenario. But as far as kind of questions for the good of the group, that's all we have. So if anyone else wants to try and dump Scott, this is the time.
Yeah, otherwise Chris is the big winner for today. And that
big
just
prize is very exciting, guys.
Yeah, it tells you how fast we build things, right? I mean, there was a point in time when, you know, you could ask me anything, and off the top of my head, I could probably tell you like what query parameters were available, stuff like that. But as the product grows, it gets harder and harder to keep it in my brain.
You don't know all, Scott? I don't believe it.
That's crazy, isn't it?
We did have another come in.
All right. Well, we're over time. We'll take one more,
sorry.
and then
yes.
we'll head everybody back to the summit. What you got?
Good point. In a gift query, we want to see only gifts made by households. However, if we exclude gifts from foundations and organizations, that's excluding pass-through gifts that were made through a foundation, for example. If we then add the contacts to an email list from the query results, it will add the foundation, but not the household who actually gave.
Yes, I think I'm following. So I don't really want a gift query in that case, because I want to add folks to an email list. So I want to build a contact query, it sounds like. Now, contact query, not ideal for adding folks to email lists because, right, individuals are really the ones that go on an email list. However, let's do this real fast because I think this might help a few folks here. So let's say that I wanted to do that. Let's build a gift query. And let's say that I'm doing that for all the gifts. I don't know. Gifts in 2020 and 2021. Because I never know what I'm going to get in my sandbox here. It's all wacky data. Okay. So all I'm going to do here is I'm going to put in some parameters for the gift date that I'm looking for. So I want the gift date to be between, let's say it's going to be between January 1st, 2020. Right. And just for kicks, we'll do today. Yay. Okay. We're going to save that query. Now let's just see how many gifts we have. So we have 3,150. That's a nice number. Okay. Now, out of that, I want to go ahead and I want to do a contact query. Okay. And let's save this. And I want to get all of the contacts who are in my gifts in 2020 and 2021 query. But I only want contacts where the contact type is household, right? Or I would like to get all of the pass-through contacts who are in that same one, right? So what is it? 2020 gifts in 2020-2021. And for those pass-through contacts, just to make sure, I only want households. So that would give you, for example, for again, the last year and this year to date, everybody who gave a gift who is a household or who gave a pass-through gift who is a household. So again, using that example, if Bob Jones gave through NCF, right? Instead of that, right down here, I'm going to get Bob Jones. He's the pass-through contact. And then I've added that extra filter to make sure that I'm only seeing households. Okay? And that'll give you that list of all of those donors. So there's 879 of them. And then I can go up here and do whatever bulk action it is that I want to do. Okay. If I want to add them to an email list, I can do that. Okay. I think that's it. We are a little bit over the time we allotted for today. We do have a lot going on today, so I want to let you guys get back to it. Just a quick reminder, though, for everybody who is here, and thank you guys for joining us today. We appreciate it. To make sure you join us next time. This is something that we want to try to do every week, so we get to chat with you guys. We get to chat more often. And next week, we're actually going to be looking at some of the fundraising strategy tips, some of the things coming out of some of the great presentations this week, and talking about how you can implement some of those things in Virtuous, some practical implementation steps. I really, I love some great fundraising presentations and thought and everything else, but it always drives me nuts when you say that was a great session, but how do I actually do those things? We want to make sure we can look at that. So join us next week. And remember, this is every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern, same bat time, same bat channel. And as always, I like to leave you with something from somebody who is smarter than me. And just a reminder, the art and science of asking questions is the source of all knowledge. Thomas Berger, very undersung author. All right. Thank you, everybody. And we will see you again next week.